todos. Bem-vindos a todos. Eu acho que a gente já pode dar início aqui.
First of all, I would like to thank all of you for being here. So, especially David and Guilherme, and also thank all this team from David and helping us to advertise this event. So we're going to start with David Hulkmeister. So he's going to start now, and then we're going to be with him till 5:30 in the afternoon, and then we have a little break between David and Guilherme, and then 5 minutes so that you, like a toilet break, have some water, and then you come back. And then we have Guilherme till 6 p.m. And then at 6 p.m. I'll be with you for an hour so that we can meditate together and we can talk a little bit more about the mental processes, how we get into relaxation, how we can find a quiet place, an inner quiet place through meditation. So David is going to start now. So David, you're now on, so enjoy everyone. So we'll see each other again soon. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Welcome. Hi, everyone. It's really an honor to be here, and I think this will be a very profound session for us today. Some of you are familiar with the Lewis Carroll story about Alice in Wonderland. And Alice goes down the rabbit hole, and when she gets to the bottom of the rabbit hole, it is very strange. And she has to adapt and adjust to different sizes, different proportions, and nothing that she sees when she goes down the rabbit hole is familiar. It's very strange. So when I first began talking to Marcia, she proposed a number of questions to me, some of them relating to the teachings of A Course in Miracles and Jesus Christ, which are very profound. They are revolutionary. They're the most radical teachings on the planet, because to the human beings, this world does not appear to be an illusion at all. The emotions seem very real. The emotions are very intense, and the difficulties and challenges that human beings face on a daily basis are very extreme. And you might say that the reason it's such a challenge for most human beings to live on planet Earth is because they have adapted and adjusted to a world that is not reality. They have adapted to a projection of guilt, a projection of fear, a projection of anger and hatred. And so when human beings try to survive, they try to live a life that is normal, feels stable, but the emotions are so up and down for all human beings. And some people try to block off their emotions and live more of an intellectual, detached life on the surface of their consciousness, which is just based on concepts that they've learned, and they don't really feel the emotions as fully when they deny and repress the emotions, but they're still there. They're just pushed out of awareness. And others who allow themselves to feel find themselves tossed and turning every day through relationships, through occupations, and it's extremely difficult for human beings to have a stable feeling of love and joy and happiness in their experiences because they have not gone deep enough into their unconscious mind to discover what are the beliefs that are underneath my perception of the world. And these beliefs are predominantly, I'll call them, they're egoic. And so I'll have to talk about the ego, because this is not the same ego that Sigmund Freud talked about. There is no value in ego strength, and the ego is not moderating between the id and the superego. This ego is a death wish, and it is purely fear, pure fear. And there's nothing valuable about believing in the ego, because it's the belief that you're something that you're not. It's a denial of being spirit. It's a denial of being eternal. It's a denial of being love. And what comes from this ego belief is the perceptual world that is seen every day. A world of images, a world of fragmentation, a world where everything seems separate and disconnected. And this is difficult. And the reason it's difficult is because it's so unnatural that nirvana, or the kingdom of heaven Jesus talks about, is natural. It's natural to be love. It's natural to be expansive and connected. It's natural to be one. And it's extremely unnatural to be separate and disconnected, because that's the ego belief system. So when Marcia and I initially talked, there was a range of questions that we kind of pulled the theme for this talk for me from, and one of the themes was, how do we use the symbols now in a helpful way to expand our consciousness? How do we use the symbols to find a still mind and rest for our soul, peace in our heart? How can I use symbols in that way? Now, for this talk, I will use symbols in a very broad way. Certainly words are even symbols. So the words I'm speaking right now are just symbols that represent meanings, and that's how we converse. We exchange words and symbols, and these meanings are much deeper than the words themselves. And sometimes the words can even be misinterpreted, like all symbols can be misinterpreted. So all symbols are open to interpretation, and that makes it difficult to communicate in a sense of truly knowing what is meant. But words are symbols that we use, and sometimes they seem to work and sometimes not. We know in relationships sometimes people get into arguments and it gets more and more intense, and finally it's like, oh, the words are not helping here. Can you just hold me? Can you just hold me here, because whatever you say is making it worse. So also Marcia uses many forms of artistic expression, many forms of symbols in her work, and I think that's a good starting point, because I as well find that there's symbols in music, that there's so many symbols in art, And there's so many symbols in this world that can help us connect. And some of them are verbal and some are non-verbal. But all of them can be used for us to find a deeper connection. So, for me, when I began going through a spiritual awakening, I went through 10 years of full-time education. I went through 5 years of traveling around the United States and Canada, learning to pray, develop my intuition, come in touch with the internal voice in my mind that was connected to wisdom, that was connected to the peace and the happiness, joy. And I went through a phase where I had to first undo what I believed the symbols meant. Even words, even religious terms or psychological terms, I had a meaning for. And I was told intuitively that I had a little bit of a grasp of things, but that I thought I knew something. And that when you think you know anything about this world, you are mistaken. If you could see the world accurately, you would be so shocked at how different the world really is from the meanings, the ego meanings that are filters, the dark filters that cover the mind and determine all of our perception. So I had to learn to travel and to be shown what to say and what to do, and taken very deeply into an experience of, I'll call it surrender, of deep surrender. I mean, so deep that at times I would feel dizzy because I could not interpret the world correctly, and I needed to start to rely on inner guidance to lead the way, instead of past learning. And I had a lot of past learning. I mean, I had grade school, high school, I had 10 years of university, and Jesus, my internal teacher, said, now we have to clear away so much in your mind if you're going to find true happiness. Because your past learning is blocking you from the light. And it's blocking you from knowing peace. It's still available, but you believe so many things that aren't true. And because your mind is filled with falsity, then you don't know what peace is. You're lucky to have a little glimmer here and there. You need much mind training. You need much discipline. And so I said, okay, yes, I'm willing. And then the first thing that happened was I studied A Course in Miracles very intensely for 5 years, using the book pretty much as an oracle, where I would close my eyes and pray a prayer and then open the book and receive answers as if the book was like an oracle. And then, after I got a grasp of what it was starting to tell me, that's when Jesus said, come on, we're going traveling. I said, how? And I also told Jesus, I don't really like to travel. I'm a loner, I'm quiet, I don't do well around people, and I don't like to travel. And he said, that's okay, we're going traveling. And I said, how? How will we travel? He said, I'll take care of that. Don't you worry. So that was a big leap of faith for me to start traveling without a big bank account, without anybody supporting me, without any kind of means of support in terms of the world, and Jesus saying, I will take care of you, that was a leap of faith. But I quickly discovered that Jesus has no problem orchestrating time and space. He found me places to stay. He found me food. He took me into different houses of people that were strangers. He took me in to show me that I was completely taken care of, even though I didn't know what was coming, day to day. I wouldn't even know where I was sleeping. And that can be a problem if you think you need to know in the afternoon where you're going to be sleeping at night. That's a pretty big leap. But the reason this was important for me is because I had to rely on prayer. I had to throw my trust into my intuition, because I couldn't just assume that David could figure it out, because there's no way David could figure out. I didn't even know the people or the places I was going to. There was nothing familiar. And Jesus took me in a way to start to let me come out of thinking I could control my own life. And that's where the guilt comes in, when you believe you are personally responsible for your body and for your circumstances and your situations. You will feel guilt because you're trying to take on responsibility where you don't really have it. And Jesus had to teach me that I am responsible for how I feel. I am responsible for my state of mind. And my state of mind comes from my thoughts. And that the reason I wasn't happy, he said, is because my thoughts were mostly ego thoughts. And he said, we have to clear that away. We have to clear those ego thoughts away if you're going to be peaceful. If you really want to truly be peaceful, you have to clear the ego away from your mind. And of course, there are many traditions, many spiritual pathways that are aimed at clearing away the ego. And there's so many pathways to God. So for me, A Course in Miracles became my pathway, but I was told this is just one form of the universal curriculum. There's nothing special about this form. There are many pathways to God, and the most important thing is you have to become intuitive, you have to become trusting, and you have to expand your faith beyond the body's eyes, beyond the five senses. You have to learn how to really expand your faith in order to reach the light. Education is not really that important. I thought it was. I spent 10 years in university full-time, and Jesus laughed. He said, well, we're going to have a lot to clear here. So this shows you immediately that you do not reach God through learning more concepts. It's kind of like in the Middle East, in Babylonia, they tried to build the Tower of Babel to reach the sky because they thought that heaven was in the sky. And that's what education is. It's like trying to reach happiness through piling on more concepts. I did undergraduate, then I did graduate, and I kept adding on more concepts. And Jesus said, have you ever heard of Buddha? Empty your mind. Have you ever heard of Ramana Maharshi? Empty your mind. have you ever listened to any of the mystics and saints? They always talk about emptying your mind. Muji, empty your mind. This is not about adding on concepts. Maybe if you want to be a professional business person, then you add on concepts. But if you want to be happy, you take them away. You want to be rich, add on. You want to be peaceful, take away. It's really quite simple. Now, I live in a palace, and I have so many things now that have come to me over 35 years that you might think I was King David from Galilee or ancient Judea, because I have so many things now that come to me effortlessly that I use for God's purposes. So I'm not exactly wandering through the desert wearing nothing but my pants. The things of the world, communication symbols, come to me very easily. In fact, there was a man who I've known for over 10 years from Brazil, and he was a painter, and he was, of course, a miracle student, but he was struggling in his household because he had not sold a painting for a long time, and he reached out to me and he said, "Help! I need help." He said, he described what was going on in his whole life and with COVID situation, and I said, "Yes, I join you." So we have joined together to put. He has painted over 15,000 paintings, and they're spectacular. They're full of colors, and he's a spectacular painter. And I said, "Great, we can put some of my quotes from my books together with your paintings, and that will draw some attention to your paintings, so you can get some money to survive down there in Brazil in these times." And it was another collaboration to come together and let the Spirit guide us to bring a blessing. Not just a blessing to Enrique and myself, but a blessing to the whole world. Something that would bless everyone on the planet. And that's what the Spirit wants us to do. He wants us to live every day as if every moment we are sending a blessing to everyone on the whole planet. We are sending something that will bless everyone in undoing the ego and waking up to the light of heaven. And at first, that's hard to imagine. You know, we're so used to thinking of ourselves as individual persons, just individual personalities, that when we think of doing something for the whole world, we think that's crazy. What can one person do to benefit 7 billion people? But the more you go into your mind and you realize how powerful your mind is, you realize that everything that you think and say and do is radiating out to the whole universe. And it's your thoughts and your emotions are not just affecting your personhood, but they are literally producing the entire world that you see. If you see competition in the world, you believe in competition. If you see conflict in the world, there's an inner conflict in your mind, in your consciousness, that you have not faced. And then you're seeing it as if it's a war or a conflict between countries or cultures. or a conflict between people, but that's not the way it is. There's an inner conflict of believing in the ego. And when you believe in the ego, you believe your identity is something that it is not. The ego is not who you are. The ego was never who you are. The ego is a belief in separation, and it's outpictured in a world of separation, where people seem to have their own minds and their own thoughts, but they never really connect completely. Even soulmates. You may have bliss for 2 or 3 years, and then you wake up one day and you look at your soulmate and you go, "What? You believe what?" And the ego is coming up again, even with the soulmate. Oh no. But that's just another opportunity for forgiveness. That's just another opportunity to release the ego. That's all it is. We have many opportunities to release the ego. So, the topic today is, how do we use the symbols to bring ourselves to rest and peace? How do we use the symbols of this world to experience joy and lasting happiness? And if you for a moment consider that this world is actually like a dream, and when you sleep at night and you dream, the world that you see in dreams at nighttime seems very real while you're dreaming it. Usually when you're dreaming at night, you do not doubt the reality of what you perceive. You go through all the emotions when you dream at night as if you're actually there, and as if you are in the situation that you're dreaming about. And the same thing happens when you go to a movie theater. You may buy your ticket and you may go into the theater, but when the lights go down and it gets dark in the movie theater, and you munch your popcorn and drink your drink, you soon forget about the theater and you become engaged in the movie. You actually feel like you're in the movie, like you're there. And this is the same dynamic that the ego uses to help you forget who you are. It has to make the dream seem so real that you forget that you're dreaming. So the goal of using the symbols of this world is to start to become, first of all, more of a lucid dreamer. A dreamer who's aware that it's a dream. And then you do this by not taking any concepts of the world seriously. You learn to let go of taking the concepts that you've learned in such a serious manner. You can say, "Oh, yes, it looks in the dream like I seem to be a man or a woman. But there's something even deeper than that identity. Yes, it seems in the dream I've taken on a body. Okay, you don't deny that, but there's something in you that knows you're much more than a body. You are much, much more than a body." And so, as I went through this spiritual transformation, I found that my intuition could use everything that I had learned, but not to reinforce my personality identity. to use it to help bring a blessing instead of reinforcing the personality identity. Because the ego is all about pride. The ego always tries to identify your mind with the body and with separation. And over the last 35 years of working with A Course in Miracles, I can tell you now, I am extremely detached from this world. I am so detached that I've lost my appetites. My human appetites are evaporating because I'm so disidentified from the body that I can see the body and I can see all of your bodies, but I'm so clear that I'm not that, and neither are you. So when you come into this awareness, you get happier, you get very joyful, you feel, you have beautiful, peaceful days, because you're not attached to the concepts that bring drama. And all of the ego's concepts bring drama. So, like Marcia, I've come to appreciate a wide variety of use of symbols. Like I think I've done literally thousands of movie gatherings where I use modern day movies, Hollywood movies, and sometimes Bollywood movies, and I use the movies as parables of teaching devices, not to just be entertained by, but to actually find the truth inside by seeing beyond the symbols, by going into an experience that is beyond all the symbols. And yet, I've used these thousands of movies to teach what I would learn, to let the Spirit come through me in a way that would send out a blessing to everyone. I was open. I went to Hollywood many times. I said, are there actors I'm supposed to meet, or directors? And Jesus said, no. They make the movies, billions of dollars worth of production costs. And he said, now I want you to use the movies with my direction as modern day parables to help everyone escape from the ego. So I was like, okay, that sounds like a lot of fun. And it is. That's an example of a use of symbols in which it brings a blessing to everyone. Before the movies, though, was the music. So I'm very deeply into all different kinds of music. And in this lifetime, over the last 35 years, I seem to attract singers and songwriters and musicians into my life all the time. They travel with me. If I go to speak on a stage, they bring their guitar or their instruments, and they have these beautiful spirit-filled songs that come through them that everybody can feel in a very deep way. And there must have been like maybe six or seven of these musicians, and many of them, they go on to be spiritual teachers, they go on to be mystics, they go on to have a community around them. They don't use their music and song ability to try to become famous or rich. They allow the Spirit to use their gift to bring a blessing or to help everyone escape from the ego. That's her purpose. And I have found the same with art. When Marcia asked me to come together and speak on the use of symbols, I should say that when I was in university, I spent 5 years in the College of Design, Art, and Architecture. So 5 years of university was photography, drawing, all types of graphics. I was exposed to the whole range of art. Art history I studied. And just like with the music, I came in contact with a huge range of artistic symbols. And over the years, that has helped me when I've built websites, or even when I go to pick out clothes with Jesus. What clothes? It looks like I've got a golf shirt on. It looks like I'm about ready to go to the golf club here. but so I'm not quite your standard mystic. I don't wear a robe very often. I do have sandals on though. But and I'm down here in Mexico, having fun in Mexico with the warmth and all the happy people. But over the years, I've gone to music recitals, I've gone to symphonies, operas, art galleries, and I've stayed and lived in the houses of many people that took me into their house when I was traveling. So I would travel around and let my spirit guide me toward who I was supposed to meet, and I rarely ever stayed in a hotel. I always was guided to go and stay with people so I could really spend time and get to know them in a real heart-to-heart way. And that's just the way my life went. It was all about the friendship, it was about the connections, and it was all about that deep feeling of being together in the heart. That was the whole purpose of my lifetime. And that's why when Marcia asked me to collaborate in this way, I said, oh, that sounds wonderful, because I'm used to doing many collaborations with people from all walks of life. So the key for me in using the symbols in a way that brings a blessing is about being 100% intuitive. So that everything that you do every single day is all inspired from your intuition. You don't do anything out of fear. You don't do anything out of fear of consequences for the future. You don't do anything out of guilt. You don't feel like you have to do things to please other people. You are intuitive, so what your intuition tells you is what is the blessing for everyone. It knows what's actually good for everyone. So it's not just your personal intuition, but this is an intuition that is in everyone. And it's so loving, and it's so gentle, and so kind, that it always brings a blessing to every situation, and it brings a blessing to every relationship. You might call it holiness. It's actually very, very holy and very, very sacred, because it's connected with the Spirit. It is the Spirit. But this Spirit is so practical. This Spirit wants to come through us using the symbols of this world. It wants to use our words. It wants to use our actions. It wants to use our state of mind to express the light and show the way back to the light that we truly are. So when I was in my 20s, I started to ponder what I would be willing to do. And basically Jesus said, please give up everything. If you really want to be helpful for me, you will just drop it all. And surprisingly, I said yes. So, yes, I dropped my education, and yes, I moved beyond my biological family to go out and meet my brothers and sisters everywhere. And Jesus, He kept me busy. He took me to 44 different countries. Many of the countries, I did not even speak the language. And Jesus would say, no problem, I got it. I'll take care of everything. You don't have to speak the language. You'll do fine. I'll send translators to you so that my words can go into their language. When He first took me to Argentina, down there in South America, where most of you are, I'm sure, when He took me to Argentina, He arranged 19 gatherings like this, although they were in person, in 19 days, in and around Buenos Aires. And then He sent me 14 translators. Not all at once. He sprinkled them throughout the events. And at this point I thought, wow, Jesus, you can do anything. I mean, you send me to a country where they speak Spanish and I don't. You send me into a big city of 15 million people and you arrange 19 events in 19 days, and then you send translators to do all the translations. I said, okay, I'm beginning to understand that all I have to do is be willing here. I am not in charge of this show. And he said, yeah, very good. That's very good. He said, I'm the one who directs. I direct the show. You show up and learn how to be helpful. So this continued on for many years. And then at some point of this many travels around the world many times, even into countries like China. I went into China 7 times and had very deep, profound experiences with large groups in China. They came from all over China. They came from Tibet and from the north and from the south. They came to my gatherings. I think there was a Chinese man who found my writings on the internet, and he translated my writings into Mandarin, and then they spread throughout China without me knowing about it. So I was a little surprised to see 100 or 200 people showing up when I was speaking, because I thought, wow, how do they even know that I'm here? But Jesus, He's got His fingers in every pie. He's all over the place. He's in China. He's in communist China. He's absolutely everywhere. And what this does is it allows you to live a life of joy and laughter because you start to realize that when the Spirit comes through you, that you're not personally doing anything. That I'm not personally deciding the words that I speak or the actions that I do. And then you start to feel innocent. You start to feel free from guilt because you don't take personal responsibility for everything. You don't take personal responsibility for your body. You don't take personal responsibility for houses and cars. You don't take personal responsibility even for children. You actually are shown that the Spirit is orchestrating all things for the awakening, and that you personally are not responsible. You are responsible for your state of mind. You're always responsible for how you feel. But you are not responsible for the images, which are being used in a larger plan for spiritual awakening for everyone. And that has been very important for me. I've been able to teach and learn that with many thousands of meetings with many people around the world, where I was able to let the Spirit come through, and then I was really just teaching myself, my mind, the intuitive happiness of this state of mind. It just comes through over and over, and it like rinses your mind free of ego thoughts. Every time you're used for this purpose, you rinse away more of the ego. And that's what Jesus had to go through too. Even Jesus had to go through purification. When he came here, he still had to go through more purification before he realized that he was the Spirit. That he wasn't a man or a woman. He was the light. He was the I am presence. But that's what we're all going through. We're going through a purification in our consciousness. So I find that the symbols come quite easily because they're guided. When I go to a part of the country or a part of the world where I'm supposed to do an event, then everything shows up. Translators show up, people show up, and it's very loving. It's very very profound. And then even when I'm supposed to help set up a community, then everything shows up. Even here in Mexico, I came down here after traveling around the world, and then I was in this area of Mexico, and I was told that I was to have a center down here in Mexico. So I thought, well, I don't know how that's going to happen. I don't know anything about the Mexican culture. And Jesus is always like, yes, I know, that's good. The less you know, the better. The more happiness can come through you, the less you know about anything of this world. Then I can use it for the good of the whole. So I have many parables of these use of symbols where I meet people and have these beautiful encounters. More recently, I was in Spain maybe two and a half years ago, and Jesus said, yes, I want a center in Spain. And I was like, how is that going to happen? And he's like, yeah, the way it always happens. So 2 of my friends I was there for a while, then I left, and two of my friends were looking around for a property, and they went on to an island in the Mediterranean called Mallorca, and they were going to visit this house, and the owner was speaking. The owner said, "Come to lunch," and then the owner was speaking with a friend of mine in Spanish, and she said to my friend, you have a feel like a man that I met 8 years ago who came to this island." And my friend, who didn't mention me or Course in Miracles or anything, just said, "What? Who was it?" And she said, "David Hulkmeister." And my friend's like, "What? What do you mean? How do you know this man?" She said, "He came here, and I always remembered him in my heart." And so she said, "We have a house for him. We are going to sell him a house over here." Even though they already had a buyer, they didn't sign a contract. She said, "No, this house is for David." And she had met me once, 8 years before. So this is definitely the Spirit doing this. This is not a person. This is a big plan of awakening that all of us are a part of. Because we all want to be happy. We all want to be peaceful. And we're doing what we believe is possible right now, all of us, what we believe is possible to find that happiness. Some of us believe it comes through education or money or possessions or skills and abilities, and that's just part of the equation. It's more about intuition. It's more about guidance. Because the guidance takes us in the most direct way into alignment with the Spirit. That's what our intuition is. Our intuition is our guidance. And the more intuitive we can become, then the more we undo our beliefs in the ego. Also, you learn that the intuitive guidance is, I'll call it helpful judgment. And the goal is to let go of all judgment, but when you are intuitive, then the Spirit tells you where to go, what to do. The Spirit gives you assignments. It gives you opportunities that can most rapidly undo the ego. That's what the Spirit is all about. Okay, well, I think we should allow time for all of you to ask your questions or share anything, because that's the value of Zoom. we can make this into an interaction. And thank you to Juliana for translating my words. I've known Juliana for some years, and even though I don't speak Portuguese, I can feel how helpful her gifts are to really share from the heart. So I will open it up. And Marcia, if anybody wants to raise a digital hand, or just maybe they even wave with a small group, then we can come on together live and see what would be most helpful.
Obrigada, David.
Thank you, David. Thank you. And now you can, if you want to ask a question, you can raise your digital hand. That is at the bottom. So I put the description for you in the chat. Lenore? So, yeah. Good afternoon. I'm very happy to be able to access this flow of experiences. Something reacted very quickly inside of me when you talk about the only responsibility that we have. I personally am somebody that I always push so hard on myself, and I feel responsible for many things. Maybe this one that you're pointing to is one of the one, it's the only one that I haven't been taking care of. And that touched me very deeply right now. The awareness of the impermanence of the body, of the life, and the awareness of the spirit that is working through this life, through this one that I am now, and how can I just stop wasting my time?
Ah, that's beautiful, Lenora, because once you have that realization of this higher purpose, then you see how your life can be so much fun and can be such an adventure. Because all of us have this life force that's inside of us, but it gets covered over by expectations and false responsibilities. And when we take on the ego's responsibilities and we start to do it systematically, like let's say from childhood we start to take on this responsibilities that the ego has made up, we feel more closed in our heart, and we feel more tired, and we feel more stress. And then the Spirit reaches us and says, you have to unwind out of this ego belief system. So I don't advocate for people just walk away. You know, some people hear me speak and they go, I'm going out the door right now. I'm walking out the door. And I say, actually it doesn't work that way. You know, you put a lot of effort building this false self and building these false responsibilities. And it's kind of like if you had a very hard piece of wood and you put a screw into the wood. You wound the screw very tightly into this hard piece of wood that you can't pull it out. Like with a pair of pliers, you can't just go like this. You have to turn. That screw is so deep into that wood that you have to turn, and you have to learn to be intuitive about every step you need to take to get yourself out of the ego. And it's not like a nail, like you could hammer a nail into a piece of wood. It's very smooth and long and thin, and then you just take the back of a hammer and you pull that nail straight out. But the ego is much more tricky than that. It's a screw. It is so tightly wound in there that you need help turning, taking steps to unwind it. So for example, some people are in debt. or some people have very young children, infants, or some people have very complex lives where they've been pleasing so many different people that when they start to follow their intuition, the people scream. The people scream. What are you doing? Who do you think you are? You know, you're my mother or my daughter or my aunt, my uncle. You can't. What are you talking about? You know, you exist for me. And then you're starting to feel, I exist for the Spirit. I exist for the Spirit. And then you have to be very prayerful to take every step that the Spirit gives you to free your mind, like in the Matrix. In the Matrix, Neo had to learn to follow the guidance, instructions from Morpheus and from the Oracle to free his mind. So it's beautiful. When you feel it, though, you can feel it in your heart, and you just say yes. All you do is say yes to the Spirit. And then the Spirit will help you intuitively through guidance. It will help you take the steps that you need to take to be free, to be happy, and to feel innocent, you know. That's the most important thing. Feel innocent. Feel completely innocent. Thank you, Lenora. That was beautiful.
Mais alguém?
Anyone else would like to ask anything?
There's Yuri and Vanessa.
Yeah. You.
Olá. Primeiro, muito obrigada.
First of all, thank you very much. Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone who's here. I'm a little bit anxious and nervous. I want to talk about fear, and I think I'm feeling it now just because I want to ask about it. But as soon as I started listening to you, I felt like this joy and this clarity that I really want to undo all these illusions of the ego so that I'm available, I'm open to look and then serve people, be useful. And in this path of the awakening, I feel a lot of fear because I identify many necessities of my personality, many fears along the way. So when you say that the only thing that I am, the only thing that I'm responsible for is for my thoughts and for my faith. So when I identify fear, consciously I say, I don't want to feel it, but for me it seems like I'm lying because I feel my body shivering, I feel something inside, I feel something in my stomach, and then my voice doesn't come through, and then it seems like fear is still here. It's very, very real. So when you talk about being responsible, is it, what do you mean by taking on responsibility? What does it mean? Like, I don't want to act out of fear, regardless of this reaction that my body is feeling? How do you let fear go and listen to intuition despite the fear? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vanessa. Yeah, I can speak in terms of the way my life seemed to go, is that one of my greatest fears was speaking in public. That was probably my greatest fear, because I was so shy. And I was so shy in high school that in the yearbook, when I graduated, I was voted the most quiet man, most quiet boy in my class. And my picture got taken to be put in the yearbook under most quiet. So this shows you how it goes. Then the Spirit that wasn't a problem at all. The Spirit was like, no, I'm picking you to speak my words all over the world to hundreds, thousands of groups. But I just had to be willing to stay open when the fear would come up. And at the beginning, just like you, I had so many aspects of my personality that I had a lot of fear at the beginning. One thing, I was in my late 20s when this all started to happen. And that, for me, I was supposed to be building a career. I was supposed to be thinking of the future in my 20s, and then I started to get these intuitive feelings, no, that is not what this life is for. But I didn't have anybody to talk to about, I could try to talk to my mother and father, but they were more interested in my future than they were in what I was hearing intuitively, And so I find it's like we slowly build trust in our intuition, and every time we do something that feels very intuitive, and we feel joy, we feel something open, then we are a little bit more convinced that there's something much stronger than the fear and much bigger than the fear. So I started very slowly, reading books or meet somebody or go to a conference, and I started to have these heart-opening experiences where I would just say, wow, that felt really good. I'm so glad I did that. And that way you think of washing away the fear as something that happens step by step. We have to be convinced by the Spirit that there's nothing to fear. And yet the ego says there's everything to fear. It made the whole world so that we would be afraid about everything. And so I slowly began to develop my intuition and my trust. To give you an idea, recently a very, very famous person in the world contacted me. And she's like a mega star, a singer and a dancer, and she's worth millions of dollars. She's a mega star. And during COVID, she was home so much that she started praying and meditating and reading books and watching videos because she couldn't be on television. So she started having her spiritual awakening, and she started reading up on near-death experiences, and she started watching some of my videos, and then she contacted me and she goes, I don't want to be famous. I would rather be happy than, she said, fame means absolutely nothing to me. So we began to communicate, and she had a little bit of fear coming up because there's so many things when you look on the internet around spirituality. It's like, she was like a little concerned, but then she would talk to me, and every time I talk to her on Zoom or we do a little type chat on the phone, she would feel peaceful. She would feel relaxed. So even in her situation where she still has the fears, she's realizing now there's a purpose to this life. And she is willing to take whatever step. She's willing to go to Thailand and leave her famous life behind and just meditate if that's what the intuition tells her to do. She's willing to leave it all behind because now she's feeling it like, oh my gosh, this is so important. What I thought was important is not important, but now this is important. So we're on this pathway together. That's what makes it such a great adventure. We are there for each other. We talk to each other. We collaborate like we're doing today. We learn to collaborate together. And then we start to feel we're not alone. Like the Spirit is bringing us just what we need. And we just have to start to accept it into our life. And everybody starts off with lots of fears. Everybody does. You know, you wouldn't even need to go through this if you had no fears. You know, there's not much point for the world. If you get to be so happy, you don't need the symbols anymore. But I think you'll find that you'll just be presented with a series of opportunities where you can just be very intuitive, and you just ask yourself a question: does it feel joyful? When I hear the idea or the opportunity, does it feel real joyful in my heart? And every time you take a step in that direction, then you build more trust, and then the trust goes up and the fear goes down. But for most people it's a fairly slow process, because most people have been very deeply invested in the fear, more than they know. And so it takes a little while for the trust to grow. In A Course in Miracles, Jesus says that all the advanced characteristics of a teacher of God are all based on one thing, and that one thing is trust. That as you develop trust, your peace goes up, your honesty goes up, your generosity goes up, you're more open-minded, you start to be more like a saint when you start to trust and transcend the fears. So I'm just glad that you're here, and I say it's good news, because now you can gain with every little trusting opportunity you have. You can actually start to feel the fear slowly going down, going away. Yeah. Thank you.
Obrigada, Vanessa.
Thank you, Vanessa. Yuri, do you want to say something? Did you raise your digital hand?
Sí,
just have to open your mic. Yes. Okay. No, actually, my question has been answered already, but so this idea of practice, how do you bring all of this to like a daily practice? How can you go through all these obstacles? Just being annoyed because you have to wash your dishes or talking to a partner, and then you just somehow they press your button. So in a way, so when you go to bed, what kind of mindset do you have? And when you wake up, what sort of mindset do you? So how can we potentialize it like during the day? So how can we do that in terms of practice?
Yeah. That's beautiful, Yuri. Well, traditionally throughout history, people who have dedicated themselves to this pursuit of God or oneness, they have tended to go into very strong rituals and practice, and usually they move to be around people like in a monastery or a convent, because most of the world is into competition, monetary success, making things bigger, building a better world. But that's why I find A Course in Miracles to be such a helpful pathway, because Jesus designed A Course in Miracles to be something that you can practice all through the day while you're still doing all the things that you would be doing in the world. He did not write A Course in Miracles for monks and for nuns. He wrote it for people that were very engaged in the world, washing dishes, with relationships and friendships, not that are living in the desert or in a tree or a cave. He made his book so that you could practice with your eyes open as you move through the day, with one lesson per day. So the text of A Course in Miracles, it gives you the foundation. It gives you the theory about the ego and about the spirit, and gives you a context. But the workbook only has one workbook lesson for every day. And actually it doesn't take a lot of time to do the lesson. It actually takes a lot of willingness to try to remember. If he says practice 3 times or 4 times, the ego says, oh, forget about that. Forget that practice. But it's more of a mental practice wherever you seem to be, and then whenever you get upset, like annoyed with somebody or irritated, then that's a perfect time to practice the lesson. And then now, I've been doing this for like 35 years, so I like to share lots of music that's helpful for people, or movie commentaries, I watch a movie every Saturday with people from around the world, and then on the fourth Saturday of the month, then Juliana joins in and we make it with Portuguese translation. So we spend a whole day watching a movie together and listening to the Spirit pour through, giving us pointers and tips. And it's a fun day. We have a full day of fun together, online, on Zoom. But nowadays I find that as you just begin to say, okay, Spirit, I'm ready, I know I'm going to have to practice, and I know that most of my practice will be mental. occasionally I'll be asked to do something. But most of it is starting to pay closer attention to my emotions and paying closer attention to my thoughts. And not just distracting myself with entertainment or escapism, games, preoccupations to try to avoid the practice. It really is, it mostly takes some willingness, just a commitment to practice. So it's very practical. I find I've had the course with me for like 35 years, and at the beginning it takes determination to practice, but after a while it starts to be so natural, that if you have a little bit of upset coming up, your mind is like, oh no, you stop. I'm not ego. You're not taking over here. This is not going to happen. And so, I even have communities now in Spain and the United States and Mexico, and people practice sharing their emotions and sharing their private thoughts with each other in order to strengthen the practice. They work with each other to train their mind. So it seems to go faster when you're surrounded by those who are also training their mind in that way. Thank you, Yuri.
Obrigada, Yuri.
Thank you, Yuri. Somebody else? Somebody else? I have a question, There's somebody else? Yeah? So David, you used the expression that at one point you talked about useful judgment, helpful judgment.
Yes.
But he also talks about something else that it sounds for me like a compass. That is the question. Does it seem joyful for me? So this is a word in English that you can translate in many ways into Portuguese, joyful. Like, it's more than happiness. So many more than happiness, contentment. So it is a very broad word. So I found it very interesting that you talked about this feeling as some sort of compass. So it's like an attention. Is it joyful for me? Is there any joy in this sense? So what am I going to? And then you talked about trust. Then I really trust that you can increase your generosity. So I would like that you would talk a little bit more about those things, please.
Yes. Yeah. At the beginning of the journey, most people wouldn't have thought of me as joyful, but now that's the main word that people use. Because there's so much happiness. It's beyond happy, like you said. It's so strong. It's like a fireworks. It bursts. It's not quiet and subdued. It's just very joyful. But I think the joy comes from the consistency with the intuition. Like, many people do spiritual practices, but they tell me they're not joyful. And I say, it's coming. It's coming. The more consistent that you are intuitive and the more you are in alignment with the Spirit, that the Spirit is just pure joy. That's really a way of describing the Spirit. It's just pure joy. And in A Course in Miracles, Jesus says the Holy Spirit is the Spirit of joy. And he comes right out and he says that's where this is all heading, is to be very, very joyful. So for me, it took a lot of willingness to kind of let the unconscious darkness come up. Because what I was told was that if I wanted to be consistently joyful, I could hide nothing. I could have no secrets, I could have no hidden thoughts or no hidden beliefs. And therefore, the majority of the process was giving myself permission to feel all of my feelings and cry. I think there was one point I think I cried for 8 years. I just cried. At the beginning, there were so many tears, and my dog, I had a female dog who would jump on my lap and lick the tears for like 8 years of licking the tears, because I had so much sadness and hurt that was in my mind that I had to let it come up. And then I think I went through phases where I started to say, use me in a broad way, and then the more I got into my life calling or my life function, then I started to get more glimmers of the joy. I say, oh my gosh, that's it, it's my calling. That's what makes me really joyful. And also I'm always to be practical. Like, for example, when I had student loans, student debts, I thought, but I have to pay back the money. And Jesus said, yeah, I know. I know that. And so he said, I will instruct you where to go for the jobs that open your heart the fastest way. And you'll get paid to pay off your debts. So, Spirit is practical. Spirit is extremely practical, always. And then I once I could see that worked out very well, it was intense at times, but it worked out well. Then I thought, I'm going to trust even more, because you showed me how it works, and that it works. So then I just gave my heart over to it even more so, said, all right, I'll go anywhere, I'll do anything you want. You're in charge. I'll follow you. And that's where the joy got stronger. When I really, really was surrendered over. Yeah. That's it. Thank you.
Obrigada, Guilherme.
Thank you, Guilherme. Now we have Maurice Sergio. So you have to open the microphone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
David, thank you for your words, for what you just said. Really nice. Really nice to be participating in this event. And I would like to start talking about Vanessa's example. So sometimes we are shivering and then we have our heartbeat accelerates, even if we want to talk or ask anything. And I understand that maybe many here in the group, we feel like asking something, but we don't do it because the ego doesn't allow us. And why doesn't the ego allow us? Because you want to be perfect, you want perfectionism, you want to compete with the world. All of that is the ego doing, like you said. So you you were afraid to talk in public because your ego wouldn't allow you in your simplicity to talk about what you were thinking, what you actually had to collaborate with the world. But really, I'm really like shaking here. My heart is beating really fast right now just to open here and try to talk about it. Because my ego is telling me, oh, do you really think you're going to make the best question, the best explanation? So it's really my little self telling me, no, I have to be the best one. But but I have to be myself in my simplicity and tell whatever comes in your mind. So I would like to ask you if that's really it. So is it really the ego that is putting pressure on us so that it can trick us and so that we are afraid in this in this intensity? Thank you.
Yeah, the ego likes us to hide things away. That's how it preserves itself. It likes us to push our emotions away, and even when we have an intuition, it wants it pushed away. And so I discovered that when the ego is in charge, it will say, don't say it. You can't even expose how you feel, because people will reject you and abandon you, and if you started communicating, you'll be all alone. You will be completely alone if you communicate, because nobody will want to be around you. And yet, I find that the Spirit wants us to start to be open with each other. And I found when I was just like you, and my heart was pounding and I had something important to say, that finally I started to speak up, and I started to talk to my friends, and I started to talk to people. And then I discovered what a gift that was, that everybody has fears that they need to expose and release, and it's the ego that's trying to prevent us from sharing. And when we do share from the heart, everybody feels it. Most people cry, they feel such gratitude. Thank you so much for sharing what you're feeling. Thank you for sharing. So once I began to see that friendships and relationships could be used in a new way, not based on fear, but based on trust, and based on a deep connection, a deep friendship, then I started to practice more and more, and I came out of my shell. I still had my heart pounding, and I still felt afraid, but I would say, I don't know how this will sound, but this is what I'm going through. And then people, most of the time, were so grateful that I did that. So finally, I started to realize the power of relationships, not just meditation, but actually the power of relationships in healing. So Jesus said, yeah, you can have friendships, relationships, and let's try something new. Instead of trying to hide your secrets, let me tell you when it's okay to share one. I said, oh, I'll try it. And every time I intuitively felt it was safe. It was safe to tell this person something. Then we both felt better when I shared it. So he started to teach me this idea of, we have communities now where we practice 2 guidelines. No private thoughts and no people pleasing. So that people are encouraged to speak up what they feel, and sometimes even what they're thinking, not to blame anybody, but just to say, I don't like how I feel, and this is what I'm dealing with. And then everybody else joins to pray with them and to thank you for sharing that. Oh, that's so helpful. That gives me courage to to share as well. And it starts a momentum where we're allowed to share more without the fear of being rejected or abandoned. We actually find that there's a support that comes when we're willing to do that. So it took a lot of years of practice for me, because I was so shy. I just couldn't even imagine doing it. But then over the years, it's grown and grown. Now, when I stop by a community, I just stopped by a couple days ago, and there was a couple who said, "David, would you give us our blessing? We're going to join in a healing relationship, and we want to speak with you, and we want to share what's on our hearts." And I said, "Thank you." So I went and I talked with them, and then another couple came and joined us at the table. Then another couple came and joined us at the table, and we had this beautiful open discussion where they were sharing their fears and asking to be shown a way to continue on to heal in their relationships. And to me that's very precious. It's a very different way than we're used to, but it actually works very well. Thank you. Obrigada.
Obrigada, Mauro Sérgio. Muito bom.
Thank you, Mauro Sérgio. Very good. So, David, thank you very much. I don't know if anyone else has a question. Does anybody else want to say?
Marcelo.
Marcelo. Can you hear me? Thank you, Marcia, David, Mauro Sérgio. So I'll just leave my ego behind and then I'm going to ask. When you talk about being detached from the responsibility about things, how do we deal with this detachment when you have teenage children? They're more and more connected. They do not value what is actually valuable, and we want to share them and teach them some values, but they don't really care about what you share. And you feel like you're responsible for that, for this role, parent role. And how should we detach from this responsibility so that we can do the best for them, so that we can give them the best from us without being like under pressure that is maybe worse than we think in this world that we live in today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcelo. Yeah, the parent role has a lot of guilt with it, because there's a huge responsibility for how the children turn out, and we think if the children turn out well, then we've done our job. We're successful. And if the children ignore us or don't turn out well, then we interpret that we've done a terrible thing. We have failed. And actually, the Spirit tells us that every interaction we have with anyone is an opportunity to be clear, to be calm, and to communicate, as you said, what is valuable. And that is the way that we heal. We make ourselves available to Spirit and intuition, and we use every opportunity as an opportunity to offer the gift. Let the gift come through us. But we have to let go of judging whether it's received or not. Because if we judge that it's not received, then our emotions go down. We feel like we're failing. We conclude that something has gone terribly wrong. One time, I went, maybe about 20 years ago, I was in California, and I went to an Indian reservation, and I met this small Indian family, and the father was Indian, Native American Indian, and the mother was Catholic, and they had a teenager. So I walked with the father, and I talked to him in Native American Indian terms, and he was so happy. And then I walked with the wife, and I talked about Jesus, and she was so happy. Then I walked with the teenage son, and we talked about the Matrix, and he was so happy. So I came back with the whole family, and the father said, well, David and I had a wonderful time. It's too bad that you didn't. And the wife said, no, I had a wonderful time with David. And then the teenager said, I had a wonderful time with David. And they all looked at each other, because in their eyes, they had nothing in common. they had nothing in common, but because I was just with them in the Spirit, I spoke, the Spirit came through in the language that they could relate to. So I think that is really the opportunity is when we really are surrendered and we really feel this love and connection in our heart, then the Spirit will show us a way to relate to whoever we're talking to. But we have to let go of the roles. If you're in the dad role, the father role, it's too much pressure. That you could do something wrong or damage the teenager some way. Or worse, not connect at all. That would be the worst scenario. One time I had a spiritual community, and the parents were always asking me questions all the time and talking about A Course in Miracles. And finally, the children came to me and they said, our parents are boring, they're not interesting anymore, we can't even relate to them. All they do is ask questions all day long. They don't even play anymore. They just ask questions about metaphysics and spirit questions all day long. And they were very unhappy. The children were very unhappy. So I said, well, come with me. I said, I will help you train your minds so well that your parents will want to be around you again. Because the parents just want to train their minds for the Spirit. So I said, well, let's work with the kids. So I trained the children to not be ticklish and to be able to choose their state of mind in any circumstance. And then the children came together with their parents, and children said to the parents, try to make us laugh. And the parents tried everything. They told jokes, they tickled them under their arms and behind their knees, and the children were like little Buddhas. They were like, is that the best you can do? And the parents said, what happened to you? What happened to you? What did you do? And then suddenly the parents were very interested in the children. So it's more of finding a commonality, finding something that your teenagers really deep down care about, maybe in their own way or their own language. It's trying to connect with them through something that they find valuable. And in the case of this teenager I talked to, he liked the Matrix. And his parents couldn't even believe. They said, they told him, you don't even have a spiritual bone in your body. How could you possibly enjoy your time with David? And he said, we talked about the Matrix. So when you really make that contact, you find a way. You find a way in there. But I would say, I have even some videos on the internet about how to work with this as a parent. So I've done an entire retreat with parents to really deal with the issues that you're raising, and it takes a lot of practice. Yeah. Thank you, Marcia.
Obrigada, Marcelo.
Thank you, Marcelo. So, unfortunately, our time is up. I would spend the whole day talking to you, David. But unfortunately, we have a very nice practice with Guilherme. But first, I would like to really thank you from the bottom of my heart, your presence here, Juliana, for being available, for doing the translation, the whole team, a wonderful team, the care, your love, you're incredible, you're amazing. And I'm sure we're going to do many collaborations together. So I'm really, really thankful.
Thank you, Marcia.
Now we have 5 minutes. Some water, coffee, just stretching a little bit. And then you come back here with us and Guilherme. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Diana.
Thank you.
See you very soon.
Bye-bye.